All right. Hello, my name is Sarah Gura, and I'm a master's level licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and a licensed mental health counselor here in Florida. My practice is the self-care path, and I specialize in treating first responders. I have Jeff Dill from Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance with us, and Shaun from I've Got Your Back up in Canada. And I'm just going to jump right in and say, Jeff, welcome, Shaun, welcome. But Jeff, tell us about your journey and how you got to Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance.
Well, it's been a long journey that you've been walked the path with me many years ago when we met. But it all changed for me. I got into the fire service in 1990 as a volunteer firefighter, and then I went career in '95, and I was a battalion chief for most of my career when Hurricane Katrina hit. And that's when Division One outside of Chicago sent down numerous firefighters to help out our brothers and sisters. And when they came back, we had a couple from our department. They showed me videos and pictures. They were picking up bodies and the devastation, and they were struggling. But this was 2005. We we didn't go to our EAPs. We never talked about behavioral health. So I thought, well, how can I give back to my brothers and sisters? And so I went back, got my master's degree, and became a licensed counselor. And actually, in 2009, my wife Karen and I we founded counseling services for firefighters, and we were training chaplains and counselors in our area. Hey, you want to work with us? You need to understand us. We're a little different.
Yeah.
And I was a fire medic for many years. When in early 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from all over the world saying, "Do you do anything about firefighter suicides?" Firefighter suicides, man. We never talked about that. And
Right.
so I started doing a little research and come to find out we have a bigger issue than we thought. So my wife and I, once again, we founded FBHA as a 501c3, and we started talking about PTS and depression, relationship issues, and started tracking and validating these tragic events of our brothers and sisters. Early on, I was capturing Canada as well. But currently, as we stand right now, I have validated 2,188 of these tragic
Oh,
events. We estimate about a 60% reporting to us.
my goodness.
I've personally spoken to about 2,140 chief officers to validate all the data that we have. Uh, and so we track career, volunteer, as well as military firefighters. I've spoken at about a dozen Air Force bases, a couple Army bases. I've even had the honor of speaking at the Pentagon. And we had wildland firefighters, so I've done a lot of training with our brothers and sisters in the wildland, and EMS as well as dispatchers. We started tracking dispatcher suicides in 2019. I've traveled well over 1 million miles across the U.S. and Canada. I've spoken in 5 provinces up in Canada, even up all the way up at Prairie Garden, way
Okay.
way up north up there. And
Yeah.
in fact, I will be back in Saskatchewan in June, speaking at the Saskatchewan Fire Chiefs
Oh,
Conference.
okay.
But
Incredible.
it's
Yeah.
just we've learned so much, and that brought us to recently. We did a white paper a few years ago on moral injury, and I'm a firm believer now that moral injury plays a larger role than post traumatic stress. We also help out family survivors. We hold an annual weekend retreat. It'll be our 10th annual one. It'll be our 11th annual We Remember Night. It's a national, both in Canada and the United States. Departments at 9 o'clock local time run their lights for 1 minute to say we remember our fallen brothers and sisters in the fire, EMS, and dispatch world, as well as the family survivors. So it's been an amazing journey. There's no doubt about it. I'm not an expert on it. No matter if I speak at whatever conference, they say, "Well, Jeff's an SME, a subject matter expert," and I said, "No, there's no one that's an expert on this because we would be able to reduce our losses, and unfortunately, we're still losing our brothers and sisters." So, but we go out every day, we try, and I'm currently also the behavioral health administrator for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. So it's something I have a lot of passion for. I have a lot of belief in, and we just keep on doing the best that we can, like all of us are.
Right. Jeff, I think, and I know your work is incredible, and I wonder if you could speak on moral injury just a little bit more since you did that research and you're speaking on it. Tell us some more.
Yeah, when some couple firefighters brought me out to the station and said, Jeff, can you watch this and teacher? It was a teacher here in Vegas. He was doing a TED talk and it was on moral injury and first responders. And it was very generic in its intent because it was new. And so I started doing my research, my due diligence, and I contacted a couple of professors that created the moral injury outcome scale. I talked to the military because they've been talking about moral injury for many years. They've done a lot of surveys. I talked to the organization, the doctor who coined the phrase moral injury. And so, what it is in its basic element is that, and Wounds of the Spirit is our white paper on it. You can go to our webpage and download it for free. It's on the front page. Just scroll down a little and download it for free because we want people to know about it. But in its basic belief is that human beings, when they're born, they're inherently born to do good. They want to help others. And then you get into the EMS and fire world, and you're trained to save lives. Well, in my past year and a half or so, in my travels, talking to my brothers and sisters, we came to a consensus that in reality, our save rate's about 5 to 8%. Because by the time we get there for the vehicle accidents, the suicides, the full arrests, the drownings, uh, there's not a lot of saves. Well, over time, you see death and you start feeling helpless, and you're training, you're supposed to be doing these things to save lives. Where PTS is trauma based, fear based, moral injury hits our emotions. And so that the feelings of guilt and feeling uselessness, losing your self identity, all these things come true. And I based the research, and we use the moral injury outcome scale from the doctor out in Boston University. But I decided to go ahead with this because it coincided with the number one known reason why our brothers and sisters are killing themselves. And that is by far relationships, whether it's personal relationships or professional relationships. Unknown is number one, followed by relationships, and then depression. PTS is number three. And it's just, we learned so much about this. So the key, though, aspect of moral injury is betrayal. Betrayal by management. Hey, you promised us more people. You promised us better pay, less overtime, better equipment. Betrayal by others. Hey, why are you stabbing in the back because it's promotional time? Why are you harassing or bullying me? Or betrayal by ourselves. Why didn't I say something when our brother and sister started harassing? And why didn't I speak up? Why did I go out and have an affair and ruin my family and my relationship? And so when I spoke to the military, they said, well, you can have PTSD and moral injury at the same time. They're two different types of treatment, though. So I went and looked at my data and I found at least 40 of our brothers and sisters who went into inpatient um, for depression, addictions, or PTSD. And when they came out, they still ended up killing themselves. And it just makes me think, were they everyone addressing the post-traumatic stress where the moral injury was never addressed? And so our white paper two that we're in the middle of talks about the treatments. And the key aspect of moral injury in that treatment is the ability to forgive others and forgive yourself. And that's easier said than done. And when I spoke with the military, uh, I asked them, I said, when you looked at your data, where was the highest uh, suicides concentrated on? And they said, by far, it was due to moral injury, not post traumatic stress. So we keep on learning these things, and we try to bring it forward and move forward on it. So
Now, Jeff, when you're talking about that moral injury, what about the people, they do the 30 years of service, they give that 30 years of their life, and it changes them immensely because of what we have to see and do.
right.
What do those rates look like for the retirees? Because obviously, you know what, it's on you now to actually forgive, but it's also that self-identifying with that uniform. And now you don't put that uniform back on again, that you can't hide behind that cloak and dagger that we put on every day. So what do the rates look like for the retirees?
As difficult it is to get active. It's more difficult to get retirees. We have approximately, and I'm doing it off the top of my head, approximately 390 that we have validated. But 37 of them, so it's almost 10%, took their lives within the first week of retirement. And so when I interviewed 127 recently retired fire and EMS, they came up with the three big issues, which was loss of identity, loss of belonging, and lack of purpose. And
Yep.
you're right, Shaun. We get so focused, and I try to tell those people. I mean, I'd be a firefighter, fire medic, 10 out of 10 times, but in my career, it never defined who I was. And you're right, some people they get lost. And you know as well as I do, 25, 30, 35 years goes in a heartbeat.
Yep.
And it's all they focused on. So now that they're retired, it's like, what do I got to do now? So we're
Hmm.
we're trying to be very proactive, especially in Las Vegas, with our retirees retirement program. We actually have a workshop. It's called Saying Goodbye, the Emotional Detachment, that addresses retirement. So it's
Yeah.
it's a very it's a big issue. It's we can't just fire departments, EMS organizations, they can't just give an award on a board and a cake and say, hey, thanks, and see you, because you're right. When I interviewed those 127, almost 30% of them said they sat around for the first 3 months and did nothing but drink because they just didn't know what they were doing. And the average age was 54.5. You know,
Yeah.
they got 25, 30 years left to live. And
Yeah.
if that's what they're feeling, that's trouble. And the earliest suicide at retirement was about an hour and a half after he had his goodbye dinner.
Wow.
He went home and set his house on fire, put his sat in a truck in his driveway, put the gun to his head, ended his life. And the note that said on there is his crew responded to the house fire. It simply said, I have nothing to look forward to now. 54 years old. He had nothing to look forward to. And
Wow.
those sad statements are, we can't have that.
Yep.
Jeff,
Yep.
that's so tragic. Every time you talk, sometimes I'm like, oh shit. You know, you're so articulate. Your research is so on point. Your experience is so intense. I want to jump in and talk
Please
more
do.
about it, but I want you to listen to Shaun's story too about how he got started because it starts with the suicides. And so, Shaun, before I take over your story, tell us what happened and how I've Got Your Back came about.
Yeah. So we just actually hit 10 years since we've started this. And we started fresh out of school. Jill and I were both within a year of working as medics. And there was a period of about 18 months here in Canada where there was over 100 suicides throughout first responders. Nothing was being done, nothing was being said. And it was literally on a whim when we were out having a couple cocktails and some nachos and just thought of an idea, concept of creating a safe space, a space where people can go to know that other people are feeling the same way. And we came up with the name of I've Got Your Back 911. And we came up with the logo, the three badges, and we launched all our social media. And we didn't want our names attached to it. We didn't want our faces attached to it. And within about 3 days, we had over 600 messages sent to us just saying, who's doing this? This is fantastic. And the whole concept was the way we started it through social media was we just took a picture of the two of us and we wrote, I've got your back 911 on a piece of board. And we just posted on our social media. And all of a sudden, all over Canada, the United States, Netherlands, Australia, these pictures just started flooding in. And we literally have thousands of these pictures that have come into us. And that's kind of the way that it started. Our whole mission, our mission statement states that we sell all of our goods that we have in our retail store and in our online store, and that money turns around. We donate it back out the door to organizations that directly help first responders with their mental health. So in 10 years, we're, hundreds of thousands of dollars we've donated. And, we've had our own service dog program as well. First responders can actually go fill out an application for a service dog. And, we just continue to try to end that stigma, try to make sure that people understand that it's okay, that you're not the only one that's feeling like this. And we're just trying to create the new benchmark. We're trying to create that new environment that all first responders should be able to work in because we need to do better with our people, period.
No,
It's amazing.
you're
Go
absolutely.
ahead. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, no, I was just saying absolutely correct. And um, it's amazing when you first start talking about it how people will drift towards you because they're looking for help.
Yep.
I, when I started in 2010, and I contacted the IFF, IFC, and it was strange to them because no one was talking about those things, and they did not want to get involved at that time. And the National Volunteer Fire Council did though, and so we've been partners with them since 2012. And it's amazing when you just open up your hearts to people and listen, they'll open it up to others then. So you're just passing
Yeah.
that love and that sharing of emotions to others, and it grows.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to say when people are talking to us about, when they ask me about how we started and everything else, and I like to just tell them a story that, here we are in a period of a year and a half when over 100 first responders took their own lives. And yet nobody will admit that there's a problem. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to take accountability at all. And if you equate that to, say, a Ford plant or a Toyota plant where they're building vehicles and something happens on the line where there's a fatality on the line, they're going to shut that factory down. They're going to do a full investigation. They're going to bring out new safety standards. There's going to be new training. There's going to be new positions made. Then that line's going to start back up again, and they're going to start making vehicles again. But
Mhm.
yet, over 100 first responders in our country can die in a year and a half, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's not right.
No, and it's still behavioral health, as you know, in society is still not really acceptable in response to it. The suicides and the amount of manufacturers that have told me, Jeff, we love what you do, but it's suicide, and that's a negative connotation against our business.
Yeah.
Or I even had one tell me there's not much of a return on investment to donate for your mission. It's like you're saving lives. But they'll sell those rigs to the chiefs and things, even though it might have been the chief who took his life at the department. So
Right.
it's just it's been an amazing battle financially for a lot of organizations when it comes to behavioral health. It's in trying to get grants. That's even more difficult. We tried. We got the first one our first year way back in like 2013 to do offer free workshops. We got $25,000 through the FEMA grant, and so we went through that list in a heartbeat. We had to leave hundreds of names off.
Yeah.
So we decided, hey, let's go for 50,000 the following year. And for the next 7 years, we were rejected. And it was the same letter. I think they just changed the date on it. It was
Jeez.
how can you prove what you're doing is making a change in people? And I liken it to if I went in and said I need $200,000 to put a smoke detector in every house, they'd say, okay, we see what you're doing. But I'm not going to have people stand up in my workshop and say, hey, Jeff, because I'm here today, I'm not going to go home and kill myself.
Right.
And yes, we have hundreds of letters and phone calls from brothers and sisters saying, hey, you know what? You changed my life. You saved my life. But that's not up for me to put out there on Facebook and use that story. That's not how we work, and that's not how we operate.
Yeah.
So we just stopped going after grants because we can't prove what we do changes and saves lives, but we know it does.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I
when
was
we
going to say,
when we
Sean,
first
jump in there. Yes.
when we first started into our journey, we started to lobby our provincial government as well. And as you can probably imagine, how many stories we have had sent to us, some of great perseverance and some of absolutely horrific nature. And I would send 25 emails a week to Kevin Flynn, who was the Minister of Labor at the time for our provincial government. And I would attach one of these stories to every single email that I sent him. And I sent him 25 emails a week for a year and a half. And then next thing you know, we get notified that we've been invited to Parliament and to go in and hear the reading of the First Responder Act that they wanted to, endorse and bring into law. in our province. So we walked into the media room, and it probably holds about 250 people in the media room. And it was probably about 75, 80 people when we walked in that had our gear on that were standing, which was absolutely
Incredible.
amazing. And then about 4 months later, we get called again to go back in for the vote, and it passed 168 to nothing. And so now the First Responders Act became law in our province. And what that meant to us was, previous to that, if I had an OSI, I needed to prove to our benefits that I needed to prove what call that I
Right.
received my diagnosis of
Right.
PTSD, not
Mhm.
the 15 years that I've been working, not
Yeah.
the thousands of calls that I've done previous to that. I needed to show them what call I received my diagnosis from. So now that the First Responders Act has come in, now it's all presumptive legislation. So because I'm a paramedic, because you're a firefighter, it's automatically assumed I got PTSD from my job, and those claims are going through a lot quicker. People are not getting denied and then fighting with them for years, losing their job, losing their homes, losing their families, and then it just starts to spiral. They self-medicate, all of those things. So that was huge. And then within 12 months after that, the entire country adopted the First Responders Act. So now the First Responders Act is all through Canada, and it's all presumptive legislation. Now, do I like to think that we had a huge hand in that? For sure we did. But there was
Absolutely.
a lot of other people that were working and pulling that same boat, behind us, and, fighting that fight that made that happen. But it's made a lot of things better for us. We still have a long way to go, but it has improved things over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I know where you're speaking from because here in Nevada, workman's comp denies anyone if they do a multiple. Well, I'm sorry, like I said, been on a job 30 years. I can't remember all of them. So
Yeah.
what is it? You want me to just pick one out in the last 3 months and say that's it? I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense at all either. The problem that we have in our country is that we have 1.2 million firefighters in America, approximate. The only one that they ever contact is the IFF. And I'm an IFF retiree.
Yeah.
And, that's like 275,000, 300,000. Who speaks for the other 1 million firefighters?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everything's based on that. Like Wisconsin a few years ago, they got their PTS bill passed, but it was only for career. And they said, well, that's a start. So we're compromising. No, you can't
Unbelievable.
compromise with people's lives. That's,
Yeah.
I feel like saying to that senator, if you have two children, which way would you want them? You want them both dead or what? Let's compromise and we'll just have one dead and one will be alive.
Right. Right.
That just doesn't even make sense into that conversation. We'll compromise at this, and maybe in a few years we'll add the volunteers and maybe the dispatchers and the EMS personnel. So I don't understand their thought process whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, Shaun, if you can talk about the app and the data collection and how that has helped, because I know the United States is going to have to do this, because even as a mental health provider for first responders, I could speak to the same thing. The moral injuries and the PTSD in a workman's comp form, they still send me circle where on the body is the injury. There's
Hmm.
no psychology, there is no DSM. I can't even talk about it because it's not even on their form.
Right.
And so, Shaun, tell us about the app, the data collection, and how that's helped make your
Sure.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we worked with a couple of tech guys that created this platform, and it's running in some hospitals in Halifax right now. We basically took that platform and we modified it so that it would fit the mold of first responders.
Mhm.
So a couple of key things with this app. Obviously, it's mobile. It's a free download for you. Once your service is going to roll it out to all of their members. And there's no identifiable markers in this app at all. So there's nothing that can identify you as going into that app and looking for assistance. So we will basically create a community code for your entire service. So everybody that works in your service is going to get the community code. They can download the app and then they could go into it. What it does there is there's a quick drop down menu of say 4 to 5 different categories on how we want to categorize what help you're looking for and why you're needing assistance. So it could be a fatal call, it could be a pediatric call, it could be personal relationship, it could be addiction. So you're going to click onto that and then it'll take you into the app and then you have a couple different options. So your first option is if your service already has an established peer support team, we're going to load all those peer supporters into the app itself. And as soon as I click on that, it's going to go into an anonymous chat and everybody on your peer support team is going to be notified that somebody's looking for assistance.
Mhm.
As soon as somebody picks that up and offers assistance from their phone, it disappears from everybody else's phone.
Right.
I then, being the peer supporter, will answer you and you will see Shaun come up on the screen. I'm the peer supporter. And I will say, hey, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And then on your end of that chat, it just says anonymous. Nothing identifies you. And this was very important in the policing world, as you can probably imagine, with how litigious they are.
Right.
And they can get subpoenaed for any sort of investigation or crime that they're being investigated for or anything. So even if they come and ask us for any sort of data on it, we have no way of identifying who that is in that police force that's asking for help.
Mhm.
So then you go ahead, you get that assistance from your internal peer support team. Once that is finished, no longer needing support because now you've got resources that have been given to you, then that chat is now deleted and everything is gone. There's nothing that is kept from any of those conversations.
Right.
The other option is if you don't feel like you can trust or you don't feel comfortable using your own internal peer support team because you don't want to be identified. Then what you can do is go to the external peer support, which is an organization that I've Got Your Back 911 has funded financially since their inception about 6.5 years ago, and it's called Boots on the Ground. Boots on the Ground is all volunteers and you're going to speak to a like-minded individual every single time you call that number. So it's either a current or retired police officer, paramedic, firefighter, corrections, military, or dispatch. So you're not going to spend the first hour of your phone call
Explaining.
trying to explain the stresses of our job, what we deal with, and how we deal with it. So they have a booklet of resources throughout all of our province and in the other provinces that they can then direct you to and get you that help that you need. They're also completely confidential and completely anonymous. So again, you're not going to be identified at all. Now, on the back end, this is for your peer support team, your admins, and they can lead this to the chief when it comes to justifying why we have this app. And what it's going to do is it's going to collect the clicks as to why your people were looking for assistance and if they went to your peer support team or the external peer support team. So you're going to be able to collect all of that. And then at the end of the year, every quarter, you can go to your chief, you can go to that senior management and say, this is why this is important. A couple other things is those anecdotal conversations, those sidebar conversations that you can have with your people at the fire hall, at an event, at a function, whatever it is, where they come up and say, listen, Shaun, I know you're part of the peer support team after that call last week. I'm having a real hard time dealing with what we had to do. I'm not sleeping. What can you send me? Who can I talk to? No problem. Let me go back to my desktop. I'm going to fire you off some resources. No problem. We'll get you booked in. But me being the peer supporter, I can open up my app on my phone. I can hit the plus button. I can hit that drop down menu and it says fatal call. Had a sidebar conversation at an event, offered resources. Bam. Now, all of those anecdotal conversations that you have over the course of the year, it could be 10, it could be 50, it could be 100. That's now all collected in that data that you can go and present your case,
Right.
right? So
Love it.
one of the other things with this that we are finding is the fact that we can literally see live trends as they're happening. So every quarter, we're going to take a deep dive into this data that we are collecting on the back end. And it's going to show us why do we have a huge uptake in the last 3 months? We've had 15 different people reach out for addiction conversations. So at that time, we can now go to our chief, we can go to senior management and say, listen, we need to allocate some dollars. We need to get another therapist that deals with first responders and addiction. We need to get them on board so that we can start helping our people, because this is what we're seeing, which is happening right now. Instead of taking a 5-year retrospective look back on this and going, holy shit, look at the last 5 years. Look at what's happened to our people. We've never had this many people off. Now you're behind the 8 ball. Now you got to catch up. Whereas with this app, it will show you those trends and you can head those off as they're happening.
Now,
I
in your,
absolutely love
it's
that.
so important to have that data to show right then and there.
Yep.
This is from the year 2011 to 2016. Well, no one cares. They want to know what's going on now. And
Correct.
if you walk in and say, "Well, I don't have that data, but I'll get it for you," well, then you've lost them.
Yeah.
So it's so important to have that data immediately right
Yeah.
there off to them.
So another factor with this app that we've really taken into consideration, because we want to encompass the entire family. Sure, we're looking after our current people that are on the road right now, but in our talks with that service and with the peer support team or the wellness division, whomever we're dealing with, we strongly encourage them to reach out to the families, the partners, the husbands, wives of the current members, because I know it's vital to have that support system at home, but not all of us do. So if they do, I can bring that job home. My family now has to deal with what I'm bringing home. So we encourage them to share that community code with the family members. So if they need to reach out and get some assistance and some help, it's there for them. On the other end of that, going back to the retirees, a lot of services that we deal with show us that every quarter they send out a newsletter to the retirees. It keeps them involved, it keeps them active,
Right.
it makes them feel like they're still part of that service.
Mhm.
But you know as well as I do, you do 30 years in this job and you leave the job, 30 years of that job don't leave you.
Right.
So a lot of those people leave this job, like you said, those rates of suicide once people leave, they're crazy. So we want to encompass all of those retirees, no additional charge for anything. And we encourage them to offer that community code to the retirees as well, so that they have something well after they're done serving the public.
Yeah, and you're right about the families. What I did, I run the peer support team for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, and one of the things that I did was I created a QR code. And so now every member has the QR code, which I keep live on my computer. So when I update a new counselor, a new inpatient place, they get it as well. And so to try to expand into our families, there's a new Las Vegas Fire spousals group that they created. They're going after their 501c3. We are actually we invited, and four or five are actually going to be in our next peer support training next month. So that if family members they don't want to talk to one of our peer support teachers that are firefighters, they can then talk to the spouses, which
Yeah,
have been trained with our peer support. So
great idea.
it's just something that every organization, I don't care volunteer wise or career, we need to be proactive with our families, and so it's not going to go away, this behavioral
No,
health. It's here
no.
to stay, and we just need to be a lot more creative on how we help out our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, agreed.
Of course, I love this conversation, and at this point, I'm just interrupting two great minds. But I,
Oh, what? You got someone else on or what?
in on the therapy side, though, I do relate to it because Jeff, ever since I met you, I've been full time with, police, fire, military, dispatch, corrections, sometimes even emergency department staff, and it was not a career plan. I had no idea. And so when people question, are you sure we need this? Is it that important? Is it that severe? Is it happening that often? I've had a full-time career for 18 years, listening to these issues exactly. And if we can, I think we need it in our annual training plans. And if I always say, if you're willing to train for safety and follow SMOs, SOPs, and SOGs, like, why don't we talk about trauma and relationships and substance abuse and suicide ideation and all the other high risk things that come with a job filled with human illness, human death, human suffering, human stupidity. I like to repeat 2, 3 times, and then
Mhm.
property destruction. So I'm kind of curious what you each think about how do we get it into departments at the training level and not this extra specialty? Like, oh, I did this conference that I paid for on my own and traded days in order to attend it. What do we do to make training better?
I think we need to, create that new standard. I think there needs to be that new standard that's created that so many services buy into because they're proactive and they can see the difference that this can make. And it's going to force those other services to do the same thing. Nobody wants to be left behind. Nobody wants to be looked at as, you know what, we're not doing the most for our people. And again, you can have those conversations in the public and with the media, and you can say all the right things. But all those conversations that happen behind the doors, those are the ones that are the important conversations. Those are the ones that allow change and make things happen. So, with that aspect, I think that's huge. We have to create that new standard, period.
We
How
started
about you,
seeing
Jeff?
many years ago in the fire academies where they started training and talking about behavioral health, and we do a good job in Vegas. But I'm a firm believer that every organization should have a complete behavioral health program. And we started a couple years ago consulting with fire departments, and our latest one was with the Joint Air Force bases down in San Antonio. And it's a 12-point program. It starts in the academies, workshops for family members, the peer support teams. We come in, we create your guidelines and policies. We train your counselors that you work with, and then of course retirement. We address, hey, how do you make sure your retirees are okay? What about those on duty injury? Because that's not how they plan their careers to end. So what
Yep.
are we doing? So for us, it's a 12-point program. Just having a peer support team and an EAP program, that's not enough nowadays. And you have to be proactive in that aspect of it. So, like I said, I'm a firm believer in that a department should have a complete behavioral health program.
Of course, I'm going to support that and love that. But here's my next question, guys. The stigma, it always comes up in every conversation that, the administration doesn't want to address it and the guys don't want to talk about it. When I say guys, I mean men and women, brothers and sisters. But what can you speak a little bit about your experience with the stigma and what maybe we can do differently given your experience?
So I don't know necessarily. Yeah, yes, you can use that word stigma, but I think more and I say this with all good intent. I think it's ignorance. Because if their department's never had a line of duty death or a suicide, they're doing a wing and a prayer. And so, oh, well, we've never been affected, so we're not going to be proactive until that moment when they get the call that one of their members has taken their lives or a line of duty death. And then it's too late because now you have a complete department that, well, we never had any behavior health. So if I'm struggling with a call, I'm not going to say anything. And so then they struggle. And I saw it evident in 2019. I had 7 firefighters who called me and said, Jeff, we went and got help. We were diagnosed with PTS and we were fired. So what does that do for the rest of the firefighters in that department, the surrounding department, thinking, "Oh man, we better not say anything because we'll get fired." And when we started, I created the workshop PTSD versus moral injury, and a very good friend of mine, Eric, he sent me a couple pictures that he was doing an article in Gems magazine, and one of them was a picture of shirts on a wall. And he said, Jeff, when I wrote my article about what you did on that moral injury white paper, he said a firefighter sent this in to me, and I said, well, what is it? And he said, it's their hall of shame. It's where the fire department has hung up shirts of those members who left the job because of behavioral health issues. And once the article came out, he said, I got another email of a firefighter whose chief threatens that if you go into his office and talk about bad calls or things, he has a shadow box of a couple nameplates of first responders that left the job because of behavioral health. He says, hey, I don't want to hear about this. Although, I mean, am I going to have to put your name up in the shadow box? So, you have a lot of ignorance out there as well. And so, like I said, being proactive in behavioral health, we do it in the fire service, we do it in the EMS world. We try to be very proactive. We do a lot of training, and why aren't we doing this in behavioral health? Because, like I said, there was a 7 year period where we lost more firefighters to suicide than line of duty deaths. And we only estimate ours at 60%, LFDDs are 100%. So that we're backwards, kind of backwards here
Oh,
Yeah.
on
God.
this thought process.
Yeah.
Well, I think there needs to be a complete culture shift in our industry. I think that, that whole stigma, that boys club needs to disappear. It's slowly disappearing, but it's a complete generation that's going to have to, come in and change that culture because, just being able to say, you know what, you just need to suck it up. You just need to, hey, and listen, I still have times where we do a fatal call and before we're even done at the hospital, dispatch is calling me, asking me when I can clear my stretcher and get back out on the road because they have 3 or 4 code fours happening and they're waiting for me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? There's no time to take a breath. There's no time to just kind of sit back and just kind of contemplate exactly what happened, go over it in your mind, talk to your partner about it, and, just you got to understand that some people are going to leave this earth in a very violent manner. Some people are going to leave this earth in a very peaceful manner. If you can't come to grips with that, and sometimes very quickly, this job will eat you up and spit you out in no time.
But it's just the thought process behind, let's take a firefighter who has an addiction issue and needs to go in for, and I'm a firm believer, minimum 45 days. That's just 30 days is not enough. By the time they have to maybe detox, they have to comprehend what the issue was, how to develop coping skills. 30 days is not enough. So I'm 45 to 60, but working with my brothers and sisters, that thought process, hey, we need to get you in. Yeah, I want to go in. Okay, how much vacation time do you have left? How much sick time do you have left? Do you want to do duty trades? And the mentality is that why aren't we just letting them take leave? So maybe if we run 4896s, if they're off maybe a total of, say, what, 20 days, 20 days, of their shift days, why are we covering that? Because we know it cost over $250,000 to train a new firefighter to come in, buy them all new equipment, put them on through the academies for 9 months, and you have to do hire backs for coverage of the captains that are training there. Why aren't we investing in the $16,000 at the most for, because insurance picks up a lot of their,
Absolutely.
when they go into inpatient treatments? Why aren't we saying, here, take the time off? We're not going to penalize you, because what's the added stress when they come back? Okay, geez, I got no sick days, I got no vacation days, I owe 6 duty trade days. That
Yep.
mentality is so backwards,
Yep.
and we're setting up our people to fail again because
Yep.
of the stress and anxiety that they're going under. So it's like I said, there are good departments out there. Tulsa Fire Department, if they have to send someone in, boom, they're off on leave and they get fully paid and things. So
Yep.
there are some good departments out there that are doing it,
For
but the
sure.
higher percentage is the ones that they're not supporting their members.
Yep.
And what do we have to wait until every chief is going to make it available, or why can't we blanket it across, and that's one thing I'll give Illinois right now, and I'm so proud of them, and I feel like I'm bragging for them that they just passed a law where they don't have to pay co-pays or deductibles on their mental health care. And as a mental health counselor for first responders, January and February does slow way down. And it's because it'll drain their HSA account or it's money out of their pocket. But Illinois is the first that I know of. I actually am not sure about any other state, but Illinois is a leader in saying no copays, no deductibles, go on in and continue your care. And so they don't have to think about those things. Like Jeff said, if we can just, get rid of the ignorance, allow the leave, give them the opportunity to take care of their mental health. Or Shaun, when you talk about, we just have to do better, you know, it will make everything so much better,
Yeah.
because human illness, death, suffering, stupidity, and property destruction, those are my 5 job descriptions for you too, and
The
everyone
piece,
else.
The
And
police have been so far ahead of us, Sarah, and you know that. I don't know, Shaun, in Canada, although I know when I was teaching in Canada a lot, they were ahead of us in the United States regarding behavioral health.
Yep.
But over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had two senators, Senator Rosen and Senator Fisher out of Nebraska. Senator Rosen's Nevada, and I know her. They've put in a bill to the government where they would track firefighter suicides. They would offer help for behavioral health for first responders, fire and EMS. And what's it do? Well, they voted through the Senate or they voted through the representatives, and then they send it to one of the committees, the health and safety and education or something. Can you hear my jets? Can you hear the jets going over?
that's
Yep.
awesome.
We're by Nellis Air Force Base. I
Okay.
love it because I watch these jets fly over. It's amazing. But these bills, they sit in this committee and then they die because new turnover. For
Yep.
the last 4 years, they've submitted 3 times and it just sits there to create a suicide reporting system like what we have. It amazes me how they just won't pay attention to the first responders that are taking their lives. But the Department of Justice does very well for the police, and there's a lot of funding for police departments across America.
Now, do you think that is partially because these chiefs know, these senators, head of governments know that these are very difficult conversations, and people, frankly, just don't want to have the conversations. So it's really easy for this to get swept under the carpet and they don't have to deal with it because nobody wants to talk about it other than us.
Well, right. Many years ago, we were on CBS Nightly News, and it did a story about how we're tracking firefighter suicides. You can't believe the emails and phone calls I got. Jeff, man, we knew about police, we knew about military. We didn't realize firefighters are taking their lives. It's like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you think that? And you're right. I think to some extent, uh, they go in, and the IFF is always the one they contact, and they're talking about behavioral health. They don't bring the data. I'd like to throw, all right, let's throw those graphs up there of our brothers and sisters. Let's show up the methods that they set themselves on fire. They put flare guns down their throats to fire off. They've had dynamite they held in their mouth to end their life. This is the reality of
Yeah.
what's going on out there. So let's get moving on this because as we sit here today, we might be losing another one or two.
Yeah.
And just you can't get it through their head to move on it.
And
But
Jeff, I
again, I
feel
think
the
it,
same way. Go ahead,
yeah.
Shaun.
But again, I think it's exactly that. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to know that reality because everybody wants to think that anybody that they call to come and help them in what they feel is a horrible situation, dire situation, traumatic situation, they want us to be able to come to do our jobs, but the Teflon that we are supposed to have on us so that nothing sticks to us and everything just slides off, it's not the case. You know what I
No,
mean? But it's they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to know. After you do that fatal call, we have a VSA, we work that patient for however long, and it's not successful. And we'll go to the coffee shop and I'm standing in line grabbing a coffee and I'll just kind of look around and you people have no idea what I just did. You have
no.
no clue.
No.
Sean, it's a term I coined in 2010. It's called cultural brainwashing. We put this uniform on. This is how we're supposed to act, right? Brave, strong, courageous, give help, don't ask for help. I handle all issues on my own. So we have 2 workshops, one for clinicians and one for family members. And I always ask them when at the beginning, when you hear the term firefighter, what words come to your mind? And for 16 years, they're strong, they're brave, they're self-sacrificing, courageous. In 16 years, I've yet to hear anyone say, God, they have anger issues. Man, oh man, their communication sucks. They drink like fish. Yeah, and it's like
Yeah,
because society is culturally brainwashed as well. These are the firefighters. They don't have problems. And trying to get that through the heads of our senators and our government, it's very, very challenging.
same here. Same here.
Well, guys, I don't really have a job and I haven't been doing this for 18 years and I didn't have 44 appointments booked this week. And sometimes that also, it affects me because
Mhm.
people don't realize, sometimes even walking in and out of this office, I heard about a dead baby, a suicide, a murder, a domestic, a shooting, injury on the job. Um, and people like just can't comprehend when I say why I'm a first responder psychological support therapist. And they're like, oh, really? Yeah, what is that? And it's very true that they can't comprehend that I would have a job like that.
Yeah.
And you bring up a great point, Sarah, because compassion burnout, compassion fatigue we're seeing it already in our clinicians. And people ask me, Jeff, what are the two greatest advancements you've seen since 2010? One, of course, and I brag about, I did it last night at our dispatchers, is how Illinois and two friends of mine created the Illinois peer support. And Sarah is, one of them there. And, they initially trained, I don't know, a couple hundred firefighters, and then the other one is the advancement of clinicians who understand our culture. And, that we finally let them in. We finally let them in. But that's created a twofold problem with the peer support team and the clinicians. We're starting to see our clinicians starting to burn out because more and more firefighters are going to seek help. We're also, and I see this is where we have problems as first responders. When the peer support team started doing all their trainings, and then the IFF came out in 2016 with theirs, now there's, just numerous groups that do peer support trainings. We all jump to help out each other. We're all there to help. Well, I've been saying for many years, especially in our department, you know what, I'm going to be watching over you. And if I'm going to send you to a counselor, that's going to happen because not only are you going on those calls, you have issues in your own life. And now you're hearing it from your brothers and sisters, all their issues, and you start to struggle. And I started noticing that what I was saying was true because around 2019, I started noticing in our suicides, a lot of our brothers and sisters were on peer support teams.
And vicarious trauma.
That's a
Um,
problem. We rush to help. I'm on a joint peer support team,
you
and
need
we
to help
forgot to
yourself.
take care of the brothers and sisters that were on those teams.
Yeah.
It's tough to mandate and say, hey, mandatory, you're on a peer support team. Twice a year, you're going to a counselor, whether you like it or not. It's tough to mandate that, but it's my recommendation in our policy that I developed for Las Vegas, our peer support team. We have to take care of those people as well, and our chaplains.
It's
Yeah.
necessary, the clinical supervision and what I call the annual behavioral health review, but that did get rejected by and large, as much as I tried to push for it, and it expanded, bigger than I could possibly manage. But I stay right in my niche here, and it's good work. I know we're getting close to an hour of talking, and I think we could talk for another hour, but tell me
Right.
maybe one more thing you think we should maybe leave this note on, and we'll close out pretty soon here.
Go ahead, Shaun.
Um, I think reaching out to our young students that are entering the profession, I think is vital. I think that we need to instill that sort of behavior and that culture of self-care in them and ingrain it in them because it doesn't matter what you see in school, what they expose you to in school, unless it's rideouts, unless it's, live on the road, you have no concept of what you're going to be dealing with. You really don't. I go and I speak to a lot of schools and those programs, and I'll, pick a specific call that, is really not that delightful by any means. And you look around while you're talking about it, and, you'd be very blunt and frank, and you see their mouths open, their jaws drop, and you can see those wheels start to turn. It's like, whew, this is what I'm going to have to deal with. This is what I'm going to have to see. Um, and I think that we're seeing a change right now in our programs where they're starting to make the students do ride outs and get exposed to this a lot earlier in their education process, so that they don't have to go through 2 years or 3 years worth of school and then figure out if this is for them or not. They're being exposed to this in first semester, first year, and they get a real look at what their life is going to be like, and I think that that's just vital that we instill this stuff in them, so that they have a better understanding and maybe develop some of those coping skills by the time they get on the road and actually do it for a career.
Sure. I'm a firm believer in a phrase I coined many years ago called internal size up. What that means to me is that we need to ask ourselves two questions every day. Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? And the best thing that we can do is listen to others because they see us better than we will ever see ourselves. And we should be practicing that with our support system at home. At the end of the day, say, hey, what emotions did I display? How did I act that out? How did it affect you? And it opens up a lines of communications between you and your support system at home. And that's what we need to do is talk about the emotions that we're dealing with and how we can help and support each other.
Yeah.
So it's important because I'm a big advocate for families as well as because of the known reason why we're killing ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I can't thank you both enough, Jeff from Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance and Shaun from I've Got Your Back. And I'm Sarah from the Self-Care Path. Thank you guys so much. And I look forward, maybe we need to chat again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been an honor once again. You're a good friend.
Absolutely feel the same. Thank you,
Thanks to
Shaun.
you both. Thanks.
Bye-bye.